Good morning. This is Brianne from WASBO. I just want to make sure everybody can hear me. Can someone type in the chat box that you can hear us okay? Okay, good. I just want to make sure. Last time we didn't do that and we were talking to ourselves for a while, so I just want to make sure we're not doing that. So good morning. I'm here with Marty at our WASBO office, and Irma is at her office in Seattle. So hi, Irma. Patty is on vacation, so I am just going to get the meeting started. Thank you, everyone, for attending the WASBO conference. I think we had a lot of great ASB sessions. Patty said they were really well attended. Marty was saying that too, so we really appreciate that. Just make sure you let us know if there's anything else you need or other information you would like to see as presentations. I know, Irma, are you starting the planning process for this year? Coming year? Oh, you're still muted, Irma. Let's see. Can you
Yes,
unmute?
we are.
Okay. So maybe we can talk about that a little bit at the end too. And I know we're working on with Marty the ASB workshop, so we've got some of that going as well. So lots of planning for next year. So we're going to get started. We've got our 10 new interesting ASB questions. So I'm going to push it over to Marty, and we're going to get started. If you have questions, go ahead and type them in the chat box. And are we going to take one question? You'll give the answers, and then people can ask questions.
I have some more.
Okay, perfect.
All
right.
That. Okay. Well, good morning. We're calling this 10 more pretty interesting questions because at the conference 2 weeks ago, we had 10 interesting questions, pretty interesting questions. Those are still available on the mobile app. And if you want to know what they were, I can work with Brianne and we can place them on this website too, or on the ASB network.
Sorry, guys.
So was there a question from somebody already? Well, let's get started. I'll have to say that these 10 pretty interesting questions, if you write to me and ask a question, I keep track of it, not who you are, but what the question is. These were all from a 1 week, about 2 weeks ago. These were just a series of some of the questions. I'm on page 252 for questions and answers so far this year that people have written to me. So this, not advancing. There we go. All right, here we go. My wrestling coach wants to rent or lease the wrestling mats to an organization as a fundraiser. Basically, it would be a group that would use them, compensate the wrestling team for the use. I'm not sure yet if they would take the mats to another facility to use or they would remain in the wrestling room. So, as I did my research on this, it is possible if your school board policy allows you to do that, but it's some things to think about. Do the renter, whether they're going to do it on your site or another site, do they have sufficient insurance in case there's damage to the mat? And what about how they're going to transport it and how they're going to store them when they're on their site? We don't want them stored outside. We want them stored potentially in a warm room. As with any fundraiser, there needs to be student council approval and principal approval, and make sure there are no material defects in the mat that might cause an injury for someone if they're using these things that you're renting. Now, if you consider this a fundraiser, then you write it up like a fundraiser and you wouldn't have taxes to pay. But if it's just a rental of something you commonly do, then Department of Revenue says we need to charge sales tax on that renting. Irma, do you have any more things you want to add to that?
Yep, sounds good.
Okay. And if there's no other questions around that, let's look. And I might say this could apply to many things that you might have that ASB might own. That you might want to consider if you're going to rent them or lease them out. And the big thing would be, what's the condition when they come back? Or you have a guarantee about that condition? Okay, our shop teachers want to have Skills USA purchase safety glasses to sell as a fundraiser to students in the shop classes with proceeds to go to Skills USA Club. As it stands now, the district pays for them and students can buy them all year as needed because they're required to have safety glasses in class. These glasses could be purchased elsewhere by the student as long as they have para required when they come to class. What do you think? Can this be a moneymaker for Skills USA? And my answer was absolutely yes. That could be one. You buy an inventory, it's a fundraiser again, you set the inventory. If these are available year round now, it's a regular operation of business, you would want to pay sales tax when you buy them. We've been told from Department of Revenue that if the profit is minimal, that if you pay the sales tax ahead, you don't have to pay the sales tax afterwards. That was last year's workshop at the conference. So this just is a product that you have for sale. If the district buys them, then there's a general fund fundraiser, and it goes in the general fund to buy more glasses. ASB club buys them, then the profit can be made to go on trips, to go on to other kind of activities. I think there's a similar to this if in the band class reeds that are for reeded instruments could have that same approach. Okay. No questions yet. Okay. If we take a donation for wrestling, and we have a few girls wrestlers, like 15 boys and 4 girls, can we keep all the donations with wrestling since it's a co-ed sport? I assume this is a Title IX question. I assume it has to do with equity in sports and how we share donations as they come in. And it really isn't how you take in the money, it's how you spend the money. So if the money is spent then in an equitable way between male and female sports, sure, you can keep it as wrestling as that co-ed sport. Although wrestling now in the state of Washington is a separate sport. We have a separate state wrestling tournament. We're one of the very few states in the country that have that. And we have one of the biggest girls wrestling tournaments in the country in Washington State as a part of Mac Classic. So it really can be looked at now as there are 2 sports, which we look at the same way in track and field, soccer, tennis, golf, that there's a boys team and a girls team, and they may work out together, they may travel together, they may go to tournaments together like state, but they are indeed different sports. Next. This is going too fast, I think. I'm looking for guidance on a budgeting question. Our central office likes to end the fiscal year with no ASB accounts in the red, understandably. I don't know how to make that happen when our fall sports need to order equipment and uniforms now to have them in time. Because they need a PO before the order, the PO has to hit the system now this year. The teams will get their budget money transferred to their accounts next September after we sell the bulk of the ASB cards, I assume. Many of the teams will also fundraise over the summer. What other districts do with this challenge? I'm assuming all schools have to order gear, especially uniforms like we do for football, cheer, girls soccer, volleyball, and basketball sometimes. Will the auditors see the negative balance and ask why? And if our budget and fundraising plan shows the plan to get back in the black, will they say that that's okay? Well, it's true that the state school district accounting manual says you cannot end your budgets, or you cannot end your cash position at the end of the year in the red. And that, in talking to state audit staff even last week, that includes each of the clubs and each of the sports. Yet, in this case, the PO doesn't put you in the hole. The PO doesn't put you in the red. You still have the cash. You've encumbered the money, but you still end the school year with that money. And then when you pay the bill, when it comes in, and you then have the fundraisers that have turned in their money in ASB card sales, and that's when it's charged to that. So there's a difference between what is in the budget and what is in your cash. And in this case, you wouldn't put yourself in the red when you're just encumbering the POs.
I can add to that too. So this is Brianne. So if this is a next year expense, you can go ahead and purchase it this year, but it would be a prepaid this year, and the expenditure would actually go into next year. So your purchase order, your district office would need to open up the purchase orders for next year. You'd use a new purchase order number for next year and post that into September, and it would be prepaid if you're going to pay for it in August, but it's for equipment that you're going to use in September. So a lot of districts, their district office have some difficulty understanding that, but most of the time in April or May, districts should be opening up their next year's POs so that you can start purchasing things. And you can't use it until next year, but at least you'll have it on hand when you get it into your office, and then the expenditure goes against next year's revenue.
Norma, do you want to add to that?
I'm not sure every school district opens up their POs at the end of the school year for the next school year, so that would definitely be something you'd want to coordinate with your procurement department.
And there's a question here, so they were saying the same thing, and just that if it's a summer camp, so summer camp, the districts I've been in, summer camps are always in the current school year. So if you have stuff for summer camp and you're buying supplies or whatever, that would be in the current school year, and your revenue's coming in that current year too for the camp. And so that would not be a pre-purchase for gear for next year. So you should be able to work it either way depending on you know, when the expenditure is for.
Now, there is one other situation here that could happen. Indeed, you may have clubs or teams that really are in the red, that have spent more money than they had in their account. And in that case, now the student council needs to work with the principal to essentially take loans from general ASB that is transferred over to that account with some kind of promissory that's entered in the minutes of how they're going to earn money to pay back that loan. Or they can actually ask for a grant too. They can say, would you grant us $200 that we don't have to pay back? And that's a local decision that you make too. Any other questions?
Let's see. Also, if you are a cash district and you pay for it in July or August, it would hit the current year books because we do not have the ability to move expenditures from year to year. You would need to make sure the vendor knows the payment will not be paid until September. That is very true for a cash district. So thank you for bringing that up. If you are a cash district, the expense would happen when you incurred it. So just make sure you keep aware of that as well. So good point.
Okay, let's look at the next one. At least we got some action on that.
Yeah, we got some.
Can you please give us some legal help on whether or not our NHS, National Honor Society Club, can help fund a student who's earned the right to attend the National History Day Conference in June? He's a member of NHS, however, the conference isn't an NHS-affiliated conference. First thing I have to comment on is that I'm not an attorney, so I'm not giving legal help. I'm not giving that legal advice. I'm a teacher who has studied this. I can read the WACs, I can read the RCWs, I can read the state accounting manual, I can read the Attorney General memos, and I always pass those on if you want them, or sometimes even if you don't ask, I want to show you that. So we're not giving legal advice. We're giving advice based on our experiences and what we've learned, particularly from the auditor. If you really want legal advice, you need to ask your legal counsel in your school district. Or we can ask the auditor. Do we have someone from audit staff on this morning? We can ask the auditor, and if it reaches a certain level, they can ask their assistant AG that's in their office. But really, we're talking about advice based on what we've seen, what works, and what we've learned, particularly from those that come examine us, the state audit staff. So having said that, the National Honor Society is a club. It is a club that has to do around academic and scholastic performance, not required curricular, but that scholastic performance. National History Day Conference is about scholastic activity and scholastic performance. Certainly, the NHS can vote to spend money to send this person to an optional day that's not required, that's not graded, that may have cultural purpose or social purpose. Probably it's not as recreational or athletic, but it certainly may have some other purpose that fits under student programs. So this is an appropriate expense. It could come out of the Honor Society account, the 4,000 account, or the students could vote and work with their principal to bring it out of general ASB, out of 1,000 account.
Yeah, no questions. I mean, there is a little, Matt was saying, the point of the prepaids is to pay for items in the summer. So your cash is decreased, and moving the expenditure to the next year. If you don't have the cash through the summer to pay for it, then you'll still be in the negative. And so that was what Marty was saying. If you end up in the negative situation, you're going to need to get a loan from the general student body. So just make sure you keep that in mind. And then
we used to have a stamp that we put on POs for those kinds of activities that said no invoices till September 1st. If they wanted to go ahead and make a delivery, but we said we're not going to, we'll pay it after September 1st, so it'll be in that budget.
So then there's a question, just to be clear, so it's not considered a gift of public funds. So what it is it's a loan from the general student body that would be paid back when that group or the club starts getting their revenue for that item. So,
and the gift of public funds has to do with private gifts to private individuals. If it's money from one public account to another public account, it's not a gift of public funds. It's the use of public money to support a public activity that's sanctioned by the board.
okay, can everybody hear Marty? They said they can't hear me, so I'll get closer, but can we still hear Marty okay?
Marty is fine.
Okay, so it's me. Sorry, I need to get closer to Marty when I talk. Okay, thank you for letting us know.
Okay, I have a question about prom tickets. We start selling on Monday. Each ticket's sold through HD Baker Receipting here in the office. At the end of the sale, prior to dance, we upload the Excel list to 5-star and electronically check in our students. We also supply an Excel list for those who don't have student ID with a barcode. Since we have a receipt number and it's connected to the 5-star program so that no one can enter if they haven't purchased the tickets, do the tickets really need to be numbered? And the question is, no, the tickets don't need to be numbered. In fact, these really aren't tickets. These are mementos. And we used to deal with that too. Because the auditor expects that we can reconcile our sale, that we can show that all the money taken in went to the bank and went into the ASB account for that account. All we need to do is have a system to do that. That could be a cash register with a receipt that we hand out. Tickets are the most common. But it also can be an Excel spreadsheet to say, yeah, you bought a ticket. Here's your memento to put in your memory book or put in your yearbook and check you off as you come in. In fact, that's probably the best way of all, because then if a parent calls and says, was my child at the dance? We could say, yes, they checked in. So it really amounts to how do we reconcile the amount of money that came in based on the attendance, and how do we control that? And it can be multiple ways, not just tickets. We are wondering, if approved by ASB, can each of our new 6th graders be given a school t-shirt to promote school spirit and pride, to cultivate a sense of belonging? The school's incoming 6th grade night is scheduled for May 24th. And if this is possible, t-shirts would need to be ordered soon. I've heard of other schools doing something similar to this, but actually giving a school t-shirt to each student as they come to this, giving a school t-shirt to each student as they come to their scheduled pickup day. By the way, these are verbatim. I didn't correct anything. I understand that the de minimis rule as it relates to individuals, but not clear as it applies to groups. Well, we have a directive from the state audit staff that was given to us a number of years ago about de minimis, about incentives. And incentives talks about 2 different things. And one, it has to do with the individual cost, meeting de minimis, but there's also an aggregate cost. And both of those need to be in board policy. So in this case, if I know you can buy t-shirts for $3 if you want. So you have to look at what is your de minimis. You're under de minimis. Even if it's a $10 shirt, you're under de minimis. But the average aggregate de minimis that I've seen over the years is about $1,200. And so if they're $10 shirts and you had 120 students, you'd be right there at that de minimis. Now, do these align with cultural, athletic, recreational, social purposes that are optional, not for credit? Could be, but you'd have to prove that if an examiner, if an auditor, if a parent, if school board member asks. And that's where you really need to have sufficient minutes of meetings to explain that. Or as I often advocate, you have a position paper that says, here's how we went through the discussion. Here's how we think it meets the not only the de minimis, but one of those cultural, athletic, recreational, or social purposes. I often advocate go back to your school constitution. And where does the Constitution talk about togetherness and cooperativeness and collaboration and those kinds of things that may be even in the opening of the Constitution? Quote those to say this is our purpose. And then also check your board policy, because some board policies would say that you can't do that. So you got board policy to check, you got a position paper that's approved by the students and approved by the principal, and you would have to have then meeting your de minimis policy in the aggregate level. You have questions?
Yep.
Okay.
We have a question. So,
Okay, I thought maybe I'd turn on my mic, but it's not going to work. So our question is, I actually emailed you regarding this yesterday, forgetting about the webinar. We are doing budgets at this time. Our girls basketball coach wants to buy socks for the team with funds from a fundraiser. I say yes, he can do that. Our ASB teacher says no.
I did see that note, but I was in a meeting all day yesterday in Renton, and I didn't get home in time last night to answer it. And it is it's similar, except that in the case of socks are something that the athletes are going to wear, so it has an athletic purpose, so it fits in their cars. It's something that you're fundraising. Hopefully they're all matching, and they may be thematic to your school mascot. I would be hesitant to collect socks and store them for the next year and hand them out, although I know baseball coaches do that sometimes. But it seems to me this is an item that's personal. When you have your fundraiser, you state that this is for the students to keep, and it's within de minimis. And as long as your board policy is silent on it, then it would be okay in that same way to go ahead and keep the socks. I see the similar thing. Band does fundraisers, and they buy sweatshirts that they wear in pep band, and they keep them afterwards. Some board policies say you can't do that. Some do that. I see ASB officers do a fundraiser, and they all have t-shirts on the open day of school, and the back says, ask me or I'll help, or welcome to the school, and they wear them at special events. All of those promote school spirit in my mind, but you just simply write it up to say, here's the purpose for that.
I would add on the t-shirts, consider opening this, instead of just giving the t-shirts away to the prospective students. Offer larger sizes. Maybe the parents may want a t-shirt. Smaller sizes. Cultivate the little kids. Get them thinking about coming to your school. Be open to selling to some of the shirts as well.
And I thank you, Irma. And it reminded me, the other part is sometimes you might want to ask the students if they really want the shirt. Because you may be wasting money too. That if it's something they want, it's different than they would discard it or leave it in their seat when they go. Okay. Number 8, we have a coach who would like to take a group of athletes to pull rye on the weekend. The money the group earns pulling rye would go into their ASB account. Is this allowable? I pretty much guess this was an Eastern Washington question, but it's pretty similar to the same questions I get about the football team wanting to sell firewood. Is like this, and the truth is, yes, they can do that. My answer was yes, you can pull rye. The question would be, what's the safety aspect? Having students around power machines, if that rye is being threshed or somehow baled, that might be a difficulty. If it's already baled and they're going to put it on the back of a truck, that's the thing that I've seen sports teams also do, is help bring in the hay. And so this is an appropriate kind of thing. The safety is important. Check with your school risk manager to make sure they're not riding on the back of a pickup truck that would not be safe. But it is allowable, and the money goes to the account, not to the individual students, because they're not earning money working for the farmer. It's the whole account that goes directly to them.
I'd go one step further in your permission slip. when the parents sign giving their permission for that student athlete to go pull rye, make sure they have gloves, make sure they're not allergic to rye. Just give it a little more thought. Don't just say, let's go pull rye.
Yeah. Probably make more money in a car wash.
Especially if you use a commercial car wash.
I was in a training last fall where there was an example of serving a staff breakfast while giving an ASB rules presentation with a staff survey about ASB knowledge. I just need some confirmation that I understood it correctly. Students would give a presentation on some sort while staff had breakfast paid through ASB funds. At the end, the staff takes a survey about their understanding of the information presented. Is this correct? This is a possibility. And what I've learned in this is what is the purpose for it? Is a purpose to promote what ASB is doing, promote what certain clubs are doing. When I was an ASB advisor, our FBLA would do a breakfast. Honestly, they didn't spend any money. They'd go get donations from a local grocery store. They would do a breakfast. There was a handout. There was a presentation about the purpose and the goals and some of the successes the students had had. And it was actually a very fun activity prior to school starting. In the same way, if this is student initiated, student driven, and there's a student program about ASB that ties to cultural, athletic, recreational, and social purposes, the advantages of building the camaraderie in the school, and the amount of money spent per person is at or less what your school board policy would be for a breakfast, you're okay. Now, some districts have some further rules around this, and Irma added that when we reviewed this last week. So Irma, I'll let you take that on also.
Okay, you want to make sure, review your nutrition services policies to make sure that, and your union CBA agreements as well, if necessary. Some districts may have a policy, as ours does, that when feeding staff members a food product, we have to give our nutrition services union first right of refusal to provide the food before we go out and buy it from an outside source. And once we have the food, whether it's inside provided by our CBA represented nutrition staff, or we bring it in from outside, we've got to have a sign-in sheet. We have to have a purpose statement in order for that money, for that food to be paid for from ASB funds or general funds for that matter.
And then to add to that, remember what the Department of Health has to say about food that's prepared, that that at least one person would have a food handler's permit. The kitchen that's used is an inspected kitchen, that there's no hand contact of any prepared foods, that gloves are worn, and so that all those other safety aspects are taken care of too, that we don't have any foodborne illness among the staff after the fun activity. Any questions? Okay. Finally, since I've been at the School of Employment for 4 years, we've always had an annual field day in June. Usually there's some way a student can lose access to these ASB-sponsored events, poor grades, suspension, possibly poor attendance. This year, our administrator added one more restriction: failure to complete the SBAC test. They informed our students that if a student did not 100% complete the SBAC test, the student would no longer qualify for their grade band field activity day. Well, this was when I had scratched my head, and I have become accustomed to not answering questions unless I can cite some kind of rule, some kind of Attorney General opinion, some kind of a publication that's come out of the auditor's office. In this case, I also called my boss, who's the Executive Director of Principal Association. And he could not find a rule that said that you can't do that, that a principal can't deny that, that a principal could say that. But what made me feel uncomfortable isn't so much of what's the application of the rule. Is it a legal thing that you can do, as to what's the kickback from parents and from the community. And I feel very uncomfortable about saying, I would feel really uncomfortable being at a school board meeting and presenting answering the school board with angry parents behind me, trying to qualify that that was really worth not going to an extracurricular activity. And so it's not really an issue of legality sometimes. It's an issue of what works in your community, what's fair. And in this case, if I was the administrator, I would say this is not going to be a criteria for your participation. Questions?
There's another question, but it's not related to this. So we'll go ahead and read that. Oh, go ahead, Irma.
You also want to look at your student constitution about should have a provision in there for good citizenship, good standing students. So you just want to refer to that and see if there's any guidance in that constitution that'll help you make that decision.
Thank you, Irma. I think you can often argue that poor grades and suspensions.
Can't hear you, Marty.
Poor grades and suspensions and poor attendance might create some possibility of misbehavior, that they may have a trend of misbehavior. And we're on a field day, we could say that that you're not qualified because we can't trust that you'll behave. But not taking a test in a class, a state required test, doesn't seem to have that same level of discipline. Okay, now we have some other questions.
We can bring questions up here.
Oops, there you go.
Okay. Oops. Wow. Okay, so we've got another question here. Okay. So with our high school, we increased the price of the ASB to include a t-shirt. This helped with bringing up school spirit, but now we have an inventory, and I was asked if I can give the extra t-shirts to the staff members. The idea is to make them easily identifiable by giving the t-shirts with the school and name logo.
Okay, so in this case, you want to give staff members a t-shirt. Again, what's the rationale? Is it in writing? Does it identify optional, not graded activities that are cultural, athletic, recreational, or social? That maybe it is help to identify who those staff members are. I will say from my personal experience, I had shirts. I was a cheer coach for a long time. I had the same sweaters that my squad had. I had a jacket that said I was the athletic director. All of those I wore with pride, but I also remembered they didn't belong to me. And that when the season was over, I stored them in the closet. And when I left that building, I returned them. A t-shirt may be worn out after 3 or 4 years, and maybe at that point you can say you don't have to return it. But as it looks like a school uniform, I always err on the fact that it's public, it belongs to the public, it's used for my public job, and I'm going to return it afterwards. So if you decide that you're going to give those to staff, and the staff wears them at assemblies and wears them at games and night activities, I think you could probably put together a nice position paper to say that's possible. And that's the kind of thing that would show principal approval, that it doesn't violate school board policy, and is particularly student approval. We have another question. Can I get clarification on ASB purchasing teacher appreciation items? For example, teacher appreciation coffee for all teachers. Again, we'll go back to what's the rationale? Is it student initiated? Is it student directed? Does it match the purpose of your constitution and your existence? Does it enhance cultural, athletic, recreational, social purposes in your school? Does the cost within de minimis, and does it meet your school board, the wishes of your school board? I was in a school that on a teacher appreciation day, they came and got our lab carts out of science, and the students wore a bow tie and went room to room and gave a cup of coffee and half a Costco muffin. The cost was de minimis. The teachers felt appreciated, and really it was a student-directed activity, and that seemed to be fine. Again, anytime you do something for teacher appreciation, you have to really show that it's kids' idea, that it's not the faculty advisor or the principal saying, what are you doing for teachers this year? Or this is what we do for teachers this year, sign this PO.
And
No,
you
it's
also
back
want
to
to,
the question
you also
number
want to keep
5.
in mind, you also may want to keep in
Oh, go
mind
ahead.
that teacher appreciation isn't every day, every week. It's maybe once a school year. So you don't want to have the frequency of more than once a year.
Okay. This one says, back to question number 5. This is the question I was returning to when I asked about a gift of public funds. Could you clarify? So we have a National Honor Society member who gets picked to go to a Natural History Day contest. And is that a gift of funds to pay for a student to go to a History Day contest? If it's not for credit, if it's not for, if it's optional, and the student qualified as a member of the school, I looked at that the same way I would look at students who qualify to go to the state DECA conference, the state FFA conference, the state Skills USA conference, any of those, or that goes to the state track meet or state baseball. They qualified as a result of their participation in extracurricular activities, this one having a scholastic nature, and it's a student program, and it is okay. We see in the summer, 3,000 students go to leadership camp at Boys State and Girls State. And in many cases, those are paid for by ASB funds. And it's not a gift of public funds. It's a student program that's enhanced because they're still members of the school. Hope that helps. Looks like we have another one. Oh. Any more questions? Well, we're going to post a portion of the answers. We gave you a PDF where you could write notes as we did this. And we're going to also post a sheet, the 2-page sheet that has some more of the answers, the ones that Irma and I discussed last week when we put this together. It'll be on our website too. And as always, it's a service that we do through WASBO, through this ASB networking committee, to collaborate together to answer questions that you have to make your day easier, and from my standpoint, to make sure your principal stays out of trouble. So keep asking those questions. And oh, we just had one pop up. My concession manager would like to have the inventory left over to be purchased by the general ASB body at cost so the items can be used in award at the end of the year. Is this okay? What do other districts do with leftover inventory with concessions or student store? So the concession stand is done for the year. There's no more concessions to be sold. Can the ASB buy them at cost and use them as awards at the end of the school year? Absolutely. As long as they're within de minimis, as long as you use it as incentives, it is okay. I would be a little hesitant to just have a table out and say students' last day of school take a Snickers bar. But if there's some kind of contest that go on at lunch the last few days of school, some kind of other activities, I think this is an appropriate thing to do. Although I would also consider going to the local grocery store and see if they want to buy them at cost. They may be willing to help you out too, and you could sell them and recoup the costs that way. Is there anybody else out there that has leftover inventories or concessions? I've heard Cheryl say you can't just give them away or donate them, that you'd have to discard them, dispose of them. So looking for a way to sell them or use them as an incentive does seem to be appropriate. A lot of those things do have shelf life. Chips have shelf life. Even diet sodas have a shelf life. Keeping them over the summer probably is not the best idea. So finding some way to dispose of them is good.
In a healthy way.
Correct, in a healthy way. The other thing to note is when you have leftovers, you need to be able to note that. So next year when you order, you don't order so much, that you have a history of having some leftovers. Somebody just wrote in and said they sell them as a second fundraiser, discounted price, just to get them out by the end of the year. And that's great. Remember though that if they have to qualify under Smart Snacks, so if you're going to sell them during the school day, they have to qualify based on the sugar and the calories and the salt and the carbonation. But if you sell them at after school,
30 minutes after that last bell.
at 30 minutes after that last bell, then you are okay there. Here comes another question. Is ASB responsible for having other clubs' documentation on hand, like their meeting minutes, constitution, bylaws? Good question. I looked that up in the state accounting manual, and the state accounting manual puts all of that responsibility on the primary advisor. And the state accounting manual says the primary advisor is designated by the school board and is most likely the principal. Therein why I'm involved in this, because I work for the Principal Association, being able to advise them that it ultimately is the responsibility of the principal to make sure all that happens. So having the principal have a method to make sure that all that documentation, like meetings and constitutions and bylaws, which, by the way, constitution and bylaws, as I look at the WAC and the RCW, are only required for your ASB. If you decide to have them for clubs and classes, that's not a requirement. I think it's a beneficial thing to do. But if you require to have them, then you have to have them, and you have to protect them, and you have to save them archivally. So it's all up to the principal to make sure that that kind of activity happens. Somebody also noted we don't buy foods. This was in regards to non-food items when they're buying that and using them as incentives. So you have tokens and trinkets that are in your store that you buy at cost. Maybe they're pencils, maybe they're pens, maybe they're pennants, and you use them as incentives. That's okay. I know that said board policy may designate that role to someone other than the principal as the primary advisor, and that's correct. That is correct. Although I've heard auditors say they expect the tone to be set at the top, and so what is the tone set by the principal? Okay, more questions. Do individual clubs need to have officers, hence hold elections every year? Can they just have members and adult supervisor? There is nothing that I can find in the state accounting manual, in the WACs, the RCWs, or any opinion that I've ever dug up that says you need to have officers, that you need to hold elections. That's a local decision.
Based on your constitution, your ASB.
Supported by your school board. And Irma, go ahead.
Based on their school's constitution. Some schools' constitutions may require individuals, clubs have officers and elections. So look at your constitution.
And if your constitution says you need to have an election and there's only one person running for each office, and you decide as the primary advisor, you decide not to have an election this year, it's really up to the school board to discipline you if they think that's wrong. If you think that's the most appropriate way to act, I've often said contact your supervisor, the superintendent, and make sure they're okay with it in case there's a complaint to the board. And again, I would challenge everyone to say, what are you doing if you don't have more than one person running for office? That's an internal look at how are we being inclusive. And that's another soapbox that I'll get on some other day. Any other questions?
We look forward to that soapbox.
Well, we're going to check out. And we have some things.
Well, before we go, I just wanted to thank Marty and Brianne for hosting today, and put out 3 little reminders. Our next meeting is scheduled for 9/25, and I believe we have representatives from the state auditor's office that are going to have that first meeting of the new school year. The fall training workshop, ASB workshop schedule is out. It may not be on the website as of this morning, but it will be soon if it isn't already. We have about 12 workshops scheduled, about 6 on the east side of Cascades and about 6 on the west side of the Cascades. The first one is Bellevue on 9/11. The second one is in Pasco on 9/13. Remember to register early. Get your activity coordinators, ASB advisors, your bookkeepers, get them to come to one of those workshops if they haven't been. Very informative. And a reminder to view some of our prior presentations on the WASBO website. Just click on networking, then ASB networking, scroll down to the right, and there should be a list of the previously recorded webinars. That's my spiel.
Good job, Irma. Those were some things I was going to say. So thank you for doing that. It's always good. We always have new members, so it's always good to give those reminders. Also, for people that were at the conference, you were able to see our new clock hour tracking system that we have through our learning management system. We're going to start doing that for the networking meetings as well. So that will take away the part where you have to email us and then wait for clock hours. It's all automatic. Patty and I still need to learn how to do that, and I think we're going to learn how next week how to set those up. So probably in the next month or so, just in time for summer when we're not having any networking meetings, we'll get that going. For now, you'll need to email your clock hour forms to Patty. I know there's been a few people contacting us saying that we're missing some clock hours. So if you don't have something from a previous meeting, please let me know. You can email me at Brianne, BRIANNE, at wasbo.org, or Patty, PATTI, at wasbo.org, and we'll get those caught up, and then we'll be going to the electronic system in the future. So I think that'll alleviate a lot of that. Like Irma said, the workshops are going to be coming out soon. We're just trying to nail down one more location in the Vancouver area, and then once we have that set, then we will get those out so people can start enrolling. And like Irma said, we've got them spread out all over the state, so that'll be good. And Marty and Irma and Patty will start working on the presenters and getting that set as well. I want to remind you that we are working on the ASB certification program. Sharon Super Jones is working on the curriculum. She's got a couple sections finished. We are going to be rolling out the accounts payable certification before ASB, just because that one's a little further more ahead than the ASB, but hopefully that'll be soon, especially since a couple of the sections are done. We'll just need to review that and get that going. And then it looks like Marty's got something to add to that.
One more. This is a recruiting season for those that might want to join us as we make those ASB presentations. And don't be shy. The first time around, you just get to sit with us and watch and fill in as you want, and then we assign you to do more. So please be a part of us. Send us an email. Say, yeah, I'd like to join this team. As we hang up, I see there was one last question. Can an ASB high school club use club money for middle school or elementary activities? Can they use middle school and elementary students to participate in their fundraisers? And in that case, that's a district issue that within the district, ASB is really just one account, K through 12. And so that money can move from one end to the other. It depends on how you want to involve students. I had a question earlier this year where the middle school went to a high school play and sold flowers, and that was okay. It was a fundraiser for the middle school, and certainly parents wanted to buy flowers for their actors, students, and it's okay to have those kind of cooperative activities. Well, with that, a question says, is there a summer workshop this year?
Yeah, so I'm guessing that would be, I'm not sure if that's for ASB bookkeeper workshop or if that's just the ASB workshops, the 13 that we usually have throughout the season. So if, let's see, so I'm not sure which that is, but we don't have anything going in the summer. We are looking at if we want to have an ASB bookkeeper type workshop, but since we are doing the certification program, we're going to try to see if some of that can go in to those sessions, and that'll all be web-based, so you'll be able to do that from your office as well. So be looking for some new things coming out as far as training, but as always, email me if you have input or ideas, or you can let Marty or Patty or Irma know. And also, Irma's taking over as the chair. She was just inducted into that position at the conference. And then Lisa Paquadio from Meade. I don't know, Lisa, are you out there today? I know Matt is. I don't know if you want to say hi, but she'll be taking over as the co-chair. So you'll see Lisa out and about with Irma this year too. So, anything else?
So with that, it's time for us to sign off. Thank you and have a great summer.
Have a great summer, everyone. Thank you. Hey, Matt.